everybody. Come on, it's Friday. Thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here. I want to thank my panelists for being here as well, taking time out of, I know, what are busy schedules, to share your knowledge with international students as they start their job search in the United States. Always there's questions and challenges. For my students that are here, please know this is not legal advice. Understand? Not legal advice. We are not lawyers. We're not immigration. We do have Jonathan here in case some light questions come up. This is advice from both HR professionals who hire, as well as alumni who have gone through the process, as well as someone who's gone from a J1 to an H1 to citizenship. So we have a variety of experience. We would like to know a little bit about the audience. Please raise your hand if you're an undergraduate. Okay, first year undergraduate, second year, third year, fourth year. Okay, raise your hands. Okay, anybody who's freshman, sophomore? Okay. Uh-oh, we've set off the alarm, okay. For my graduate students, let's see a show of hands there. Okay, keep your hands up if you're STEM. Okay, put your hands down. Who are my business students? Okay, we have one business here. You guys will just be paired up. So what I would like to do, my name, of course, is Lisa Witt with Career Services, and I'm happy to have you here tonight. I would like to introduce our panelists. I'll start with the screen. And we have Joanne Henderson. Joanne's role is Talent Acquisition Manager for LexisNexis. And
yes,
then
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Joanne.
No, go ahead. I thought we had to make introductions. That's fine.
Okay. And then Tusitha is from UDRI, and he is a group leader and a senior microbiologist. And Q on the end is a energy engineer from Go Sustainable Energy. And Yaman is an fixed asset accountant from Puyao. Okay? And so what we'll do is have everyone do an introduction so they can give you a little more about themselves. Joanne, would you like to start?
Yes. So my name is Joanne Henderson. I've been with LexisNexis for almost 5 years. I'm based in the Raleigh office. We hire across the board, sales, heavy technology in Raleigh, some in Dayton as well. Just, excited about being able to, provide any insight that I can.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Yeah, I'm Tusitha Gunasekara, and I'm from University of Dayton Research Institute. UDRI, stand for University of Dayton Research Institute, is a professional and research arm for the UD. And I'm a senior research microbiologist and the group leader. And under me, there are PhDs and masters, and some students working with me. So most of them are biologists and chemical engineers. I like to share my career path here. I came to the United States 16 years ago. Currently, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I came a J1 visa. So I had to go through all that, and in future questions, I'll address all that. Thank you.
Very good. Yuman?
Okay, I'm Yuman. I'm from China. I studied at MBA and accounting at UD and graduated 3 years ago. So for non-STEM students, I have more experience. And before I got current job at Fuyao as a content, I work on campus and off campus, got several different internship jobs, but majorly related to accounting. So I want to share my experience, and I hope I can help you guys and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Q. My name is Abdul Qayyum. I go by Q, so you can all call me Q. I'm a UD alum. I graduated in 2013. I'm at Go Sustainable Energy. We're a small mechanical engineering consulting firm out of Columbus. We have 15 engineers, so we're a very small firm compared to other people here speaking. So I'll have more insights to share from smaller firms and startups, what have you. But yeah, and thank you a lot to the Career Services wing to hosting something like this, because I know as a student I would have loved to have some insight like this.
Very good. And so how we will do the panel is I will ask some questions that I presented to the panelists so that they could prepare for this event. And then at the end, I'm going to open up the floor for you to ask certain questions as well. So we'll let the panelists answer the questions. I think you'll find most of them relevant. And so we will start with Joanne. Can you please share the general process of hiring in the U.S. from an employer's perspective?
Yeah, that's a big question. So essentially, there are a couple of ways that I'm in talent acquisition. So there are a few ways that a candidate can have a pathway into a company. The three main ways are applying directly online. You'll see directly on a company's website, or there are lots of sites that scrape from company websites, so you can apply through Glassdoor, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, and such. Two, you can be referred into the company, which is always a great method for employers to find great people. That's an importance of networking. So, and then the other pathway is passive recruitment, when either a company representative in talent acquisition or a company they partnered with will reach out to you directly to determine if you're a good fit for a role. At that point, you will get some type of screening, whether it's a phone screen. Companies are being very creative now. You may have an online phone screen. You may fill out a screening form. You may come directly on site. But at some point, you'll have some type of conversation to assess your skill set. During those conversations, you'll be asked several questions with regard to your interests, what you're looking for, compensation. Depending on the state in which you're working, those rules have changed. For example, employers are not allowed to ask a person's current compensation if they're recruiting for a position in New York, California, New Jersey, Philadelphia, not all of Pennsylvania, but just Philadelphia, and those rules are expanding almost daily, it seems. And then for the purpose of this conversation, you will be asked your eligibility to work in the U.S. That is all that an employer can ask. We're not allowed necessarily to ask visa status. We're just about as your eligibility to work. At that point, if the conversation goes well, you would be given an offer, which would include compensation, details on benefits, and everything that they have to offer. And then you would be given the opportunity to respond. The majority of companies will require some type of background check as a part of onboarding, so know that all offers are going to be contingent on completing said background check. It would be employment, criminal background check, education verification. Some companies also require drug screens. And then after that is completed, more than likely you'll get, you'll pass, and then you'll be able to, kind of start your first day of work. Typically we, allow for, and it would prefer people to give 2-week notices to their current employers, because we don't want people to burn bridges, and it's important because the relationships you have as you're going into the workforce will go with you for years and years and years, so you always want to start on a good foot and leave on a good foot. So I think I've kind of touched everything from applying, screening, the interview process, the onboarding and hiring process, and there you go.
That's perfect. Thank you, Joanne. Easy, right? Maybe not so easy. Q, could you tell us how should students answer questions related to sponsorship on an application?
So that's a That's a good question. The first thing, like Joanne said, there will be questions when you apply online or you meet someone from HR. So first thing, don't lie, right? Be honest, because some people are like, well, you know what I'll do? I'll not tell them that I need any sponsorship, and then I'll pose it to them when they really like me. And that gets you into trouble really quick. And it might get you into trouble in the later stages, which is not where you want the trouble. So that is something you want to be upfront about. There is, though, coming from a small business perspective, we have more questions relating to this, but I'll just touch on this, is a lot of the hesitation in small companies is because of the lack of understanding of how everything works and how hard it is. But it's not that hard. So you need to do your research as a student. The international office is here. They do events where immigration attorneys come in and speak. So like Lisa said, this is not legal advice, but there are some things you should know. Just as an international student, you should know, especially if you're applying to a small or medium business who is unaware of how the process goes. If you know a bit about it, it takes the pressure off the employer, because it's another thing that's a complete unknown that the employer has to figure out, and that can be a turnoff. But if you have that interest and if you're willing to help the employer with that, they're really open.
Was that your experience?
Yes, in my case, it was. Being a very small company. Like I said, we're 15 engineers and we have one office manager. So we don't have a big HR division. We don't have lawyers. We have the minimum required for a small company. So going in, I know what helped me was I attended one of the sessions put up by the international office, and where a lawyer came in and they speak about this whole career path of how the entire process works, things like that, which gives you a much better understanding. And when I was able to explain that to my boss, he was like, great, you can handle that. So it does help.
Thank you. Iman, what are the limitations to the H-1B visa as an employee?
Sorry. The limitation for H-1B, I think there are several different ways. Like first, for you need to know the process, and there's a risk for students from China, India. There's a cap, so there's a risk to win the lottery and to get approved. So the employer will think about this, and they will have a risk to hire a student. They want to hire a person can work for them forever, but that's not reality. At least they want to hire you for at least 3 years, 5 years. But especially for non-STEM students, we only have 1 year OPT, and the STEM students have 3 years. Even 3 years, there's still risk. I think that's a major limitation for H-1B visa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joanne, can I ask you a question here?
Sure.
One of the things I tell students is very often domestic students will not stay at a company for more than 18 months to 2 years either. And I talk to them about playing that as a strength for at least the STEM students being able to do 3 years. Would you have anything to say to that kind of guidance that I've been giving?
I think you're accurate. Most people are going to, especially after their first year, the first position out of college, are probably going to stay for about a year. And then, they'll move on. For the international students that I've hired, and the majority of our interns and the ones that we hire full-time at the master's level are international students. And so we file their visas the following year because the lottery happens, I think, in March or April, and we have to submit all the names. And so the students will tend to work on their OPT with us for those 2 to 3 years while waiting for our visa filing. So I will say we've had a good deal of consistency with regard to retention for our international students, especially the ones that we've hired right out of college. I see the interns that I hired 3 or 4 years ago who are still here and building their careers. And so I definitely think that that has been something that we've seen with regard to retention as being a positive, especially for our new graduates.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sorry, Lisa, I also want to mention H-1B visa has a limitation on location and the position and the company. Even if you change to another company, even you got H-1B visa, switch to another company or in the same company, but switch to another position or to another location, but the same title, you have to refile the H-1B visa, and at that process, during that process, still the company and you will have a risk to get denied. So it's kind of a reapply. So that's like when company hire H-1B student, they don't want to move you to another location or another position. That's a limitation as well.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I can chime in on that just a tad, and what she's saying is really accurate with regard to the filing and how careful and diligent a company has to be. But I do think that larger companies, like we have our own immigration specialists, will be able to have people that can support throughout the whole process. So a question you will want to ask is, do they have that type of support to avoid the risk? Because if the paperwork is done incorrectly, that is a risk. That is a risk, as she was saying. But we don't want that to inhibit people to move, but you do have to make sure that you have they have the right support to make sure that all the filings are done correctly and on time.
Okay, very good. Jasitha, what do you see are the advantages do you see in international students when compared to domestic students?
I would say the international students are highly motivated because they are away from their countries and you spend more, fees. So therefore, I see the students, international students, are highly motivated to achieve their targets. That's the kind of one thing I myself. So that's the one real important thing. The international students are highly motivated, and they are the brightest, students coming here because they've gone through all those, process. They had to do GRE and all the tests. So that's one thing I noticed. Most of the international students are happy to work, extended hours. So that's kind of trying to impress the employers. That's one thing I myself did. One thing I had to elaborate a little bit, I was in the academia most of my career. So I've been at least now 25 years working internationally. So that helped me a lot. Getting my J1, I came exchange visitor. Exchange visitor is 2-year process. 2 years I had to get back. So, but thing is, I was able to get H-1B visa. So because as I said, the Caribbean, there's no cap in the universities. So that helped me a lot to get, and also in the meantime, I was very productive. I was able to publish papers, and that helped me to get the green card too. So that's kind of opening for me as a scientist. I came here as postdoctoral research. I already done my PhD elsewhere. So that helped me a lot to get my H-1B and then the green card. So I was in academia. So I kind of very motivated. I want to publish research. So that helped me actually getting this green card. So that's kind of my experience.
Joanne, when and how should students share their visa status, including the hiring process and career affairs?
Most of the time, students will come and ask, at career fairs, they will ask, do you hire students with visas? That's been more prevalent over the last 2 years because we've, with some of the changes in the laws, some companies have been a bit more hesitant than they've been in the past. So normally that's the first, question we get. During the hiring process, a recruiter will normally ask, are you eligible to work in the U.S.? And at that point, you're able to respond back with your status and eligibility and what the eligibility is based on, whether it's CBP or OBP or whichever, H-1 visa or TN-1 visa, whichever type of visa a person is on. So that is a point I think that you'll want to make sure to answer that question. And then the follow-up will be, if you're on an H-1 visa, how many years do you have left? Has your I-40 been filed? So there are a lot of follow-up questions from there, but you want to answer that early in the hiring process.
Okay. One of the things that I will guide students at a career fair is to not bring up the H-1B question. I tell them it's much like asking someone to marry them on a first date. Really talking to the professionals more about what their skills and abilities are, getting in there to get a chance to prove the value. Is that good advice or no?
I think that's really good advice. I think that, here companies are pretty transparent, that like they have a company that said, they're not sponsoring. They'll put a little sign up or something. But yeah, I like to talk to people about their skill set and get them drawn in and understand what they do. And then when you get called back for an interview, that's when you want to have those discussions. But you don't want to, if a student goes up to a company and says, do you sponsor people? They may say no or yes or whichever, but what's going to happen? You're going to walk away from that company, right? You could have made a connection, network, or something. So I definitely wouldn't lead with that question, because the response is, what are you going to do when you get the answer no, right? Or
right.
Yes, you always want to lead with your skill set.
Okay,
yeah.
Q.
I'll add, just to add to Joanne's point, what she described as accurate. One thing to keep in mind, if you're meeting a company or interviewing, you want to do your own research and see, for example, the E-Verify database is public. So you'll know if people have done OPT extensions at that company, which will give you an idea of, does this company even deal with visas or any such thing? And at the end of your first interview, definitely in your technical interview, when you have that, you do want to end asking that, because you do have limited time. Some employers have their foot down and just say, no, we don't do that for, they might have some other legal issue they don't do it for. So that's just one thing you do want to confirm before you accept the job, but definitely not lead with that question.
Okay. And then I think Q, you're next. How much harder and money intensive is the process for an employer sponsoring an international student?
So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Lisa, I had a more broader picture, which I was gonna share this is like general hiring from the employer's perspective. Joanne touched on this. I'm gonna talk more from the technical side, the technical person interviewing you. And I think this will lead in to this question, because there is, I know, for me, there was a lot of anxiety, because I would think of, oh, I'm more expensive to this employer because of visa, and I don't even know what that means. Like, everybody would be like, oh, they have to sponsor visa, it's expensive. So one thing I think students, international students especially, you wanna focus on skill. Like Joanne says, she leads with what the skills that people have. And I want to stress this point. If you leave with nothing from here, is the point that you need to have skill. You need to be able to communicate. These are the two, if you sum everything up, it comes down to these two buckets. And the reason I say this is if you hear the radio or news, you'll see you'll hear unemployment as it is at its low. So there is not a lot of skilled labor outside that is readily available. So have that skill. It is true that, the employer has to sponsor you. You're more expensive. I'll get into how expensive, and then Joanne might because I'll have a very small company perspective. Joanne might have a better one. But you have to think about what skill do I bring to the table. You should be confident in that, and you should lead with that. So it's very important, because when you're going through the technical interview, what the technical person is looking at is, does this person has demonstrated skill, and can they accomplish the tasks we give them? And by demonstrated skill, I mean it needs to be demonstrated through some manner, like research projects, publications, internships, because if no one can authenticate the skill you have, then it doesn't mean much, and it's more riskier because the employer doesn't know your culture, he doesn't recognize your undergraduate university for students who are doing masters here. So you need to have demonstrated skills. So you need to publish, get into internships, things like that. Now, with that said, we touched on what are the advantages of having international students. And I think one thing with internationals is, like Joanne mentioned, like students move around a lot. Like their first job, they just stay there just because it's a stepping stone, because they want to go to different places, see what they like, and put roots down at different places. International students are unique in you are looking to put roots down. You've already moved from your comfort zone. So they're usually long-term stays. And I think you should keep that in mind, be confident with that, and not directly advertise, but you should keep that in mind and sort of lead with that next with your skills, that you're looking for something like a long-term commitment, which is what employers like a lot. So when we put all these advantages together, there is cost. I don't want to give out dollar numbers because, I'm not a lawyer. Things change, regulations change. But from our perspective, it's like getting an expensive laptop every year for every one of the internationals we have, which from a company's perspective, that is not a lot. Like, if you have someone working on site, they drop their laptop, that's a sunk cost, the company rolls it in, it's a tax write-off, you get a new laptop. So I guess what I'm leading with here is I remember when I was a student oh, you're so expensive, you're so expensive. When you look at the big picture and the long-term commitment, you're not that much more expensive. And for an employer who does a lot of H-1s, which I know about employers in our field who are not us, obviously, but they have absolutely no problem hiring international students because the field we work in has a shortage of talent. So it doesn't matter if all the local talent is already hired. There's no unemployed local talent. So international talent is fair game. So at that front, they have no problems, and they won't even bring it up. They'll be like, yeah, we have people who handle that. For smaller companies who don't handle that on a regular basis, you need to do your research to make them feel that you understand a bit of it. And in the end, what happens is small companies hire legal immigration counsel anyways. So it's not like you're doing the job, but you need to be aware to pull off that pressure, because the dollar cost of the process is not high. The cost that's associated for small and medium companies is with understanding the process of how this whole thing works. And if you know that, you've already taken a big chunk of that cost and uncertainty and risk off for that employer. So I know that was a long answer, but Joanne might have stuff to add from a big employer's perspective on that, I think.
Joanne, is there anything you want to add to that?
If we're looking at pure cost?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think Q's point is very necessary when you think about the cost. The cost is really not a big driver for us as to whether, and mind you, we're a big company, right? So to his point about the computer, I mean, I dropped my computer, well, I didn't drop it, but my screen cracked, got another one. But, you know, they steal money really easily. The cost to transfer a visa is, you know, just a couple of $1,000s, and for you know, someone working on the OPT and you're filing it, I mean, it's even less than that. I mean, you have the cost of the attorney, right, and the labor of the person, like our immigration specialist, who's responsible for it. But in the same vein, you know, we pay agencies for talent at 15 to 20% of salary. So if we're, you know, someone's making $75,000 or $80,000 a year, and we have to pay 15 to 20% as a fee. I mean, that's, you know, way more than the cost of transferring a visa. So if you want to really look at the cost as a cost of doing business, and every company has a cost of doing business, and the cost of hiring a person with a visa is a cost of doing business, no different than ordering equipment or anything when it comes to just like, or, you know, my desk, or, you know, paying for our benefits, you know, what a company pays for a person to have, you know, benefits and 401k. So it's just a cost, and companies that want to hire high quality talent are willing to pay the cost required to be able to attain that talent. So back to Q's point, it really is about the talent, and the companies are going to do what they need to do to be able to get the best people.
Very good. I want to bring up a point. And I had an appointment. Is Ali in here at all? He was supposed to be here. I met with a student today who's materials engineering, polymers to be exact, and he comes into this appointment saying, Lisa, everyone, all my seniors are telling me I should switch to mechanical engineering because there's more jobs. And I want to kind of flip to Q's point. Your skill sets and unique areas is where the shortages are. So even though there are fewer jobs, there's also fewer people going for those jobs. So if you have a passion for something and that's what gets you excited, don't let somebody's advice, who I know has not come into the office to work with me, make you change your major and your dream. Is that fair? And everyone's experience?
I also want to share something. So I worked academia all my life, so I didn't look for, you know, jobs in industries. I know industries pay you a lot, pay you better, I would say, compared to academia. So I actually went through, I was paid under pretty much, unemployed to some extent. So I had to do multiple postdoctoral degrees to stay my visa, you know, getting to J to H1, H1 to green card. So I think in the long run, it paid for me. It looks to me that I've got the citizenship, and actually I was offered a job also in the government now. So that's kind of the long run you need to think about. Either you're going to stay here for a long time, or you want to make a little better salary, and, you know, that's kind of a thing I balance. So I think the decision I took sometimes correct. I feel like that I was paid under to some extent in the academia, or compare industries, but in the long term, you know, it's good, and I kind of enjoy working in the academia. So that's kind of, you know, sometimes you may not get paid well at the beginning. So this is all you sacrifice that will help you in the long run.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Lisa. My major is accounting. So a lot of domestic students study in accounting as well. So my current employer is a Chinese company, but since last year, we actually closed the door to hire international students. So especially in my group, we have 15 people in our finance team. And but at the same time, even we say we do not hire international student anymore, but our president and our HR director will go to me, ask me, do you have any person you know who can qualify to this job? So we're really looking for the skill, as Q said, like who can qualify for the position, no matter what's the popular major or the popular shortage position. Yeah.
And I want to emphasize, to Yimeng's point, there is this spectrum of government jobs that cannot hire because you must be a U.S. citizen. And then on the other side, we have companies who very openly hire international students, like Cummins. And in the middle, there's 53 million businesses in the United States. And a huge gap of a middle are companies who may have policy that says, no, we don't, but if they like you and you get referred through networking, they will bend the policy. And companies who've never hired don't know the process. To Q's point, if you know the process and can convince them that you can solve a problem they have, then they'll consider it. So there's a whole gamut there that you need to understand. If you're looking for a job here, you want to understand the whole process.
I wanted to add, Lisa, to your point, and just loop that into the demonstrated skill bucket, because that was the exact thing that happened to me. I came here, I had my undergrad in mechanical engineering, and I wanted to do something very specific. I wanted to do energy efficiency engineering, and all my seniors were like, well, you're limiting your scope for jobs, you know, energy efficiency, where are you going to find a job? But I'll say if you have interest in a skill, you should go for it. Because, for example, right now, there is not energy efficiency companies cannot find enough people to hire. So when you are in a niche, it's harder to get the job. That's only because you don't know who's hiring. Because a lot of these companies can be small businesses and stuff, and that's where demonstrated skill comes into play. If you're really working with your professor on research project, they will know what companies there are. They will likely push you to publish a paper and go to a conference. You will meet companies who operate in that field. They will likely push you to do internships, or else the career services office push you to internships. And that is a really great way for international students. And the visa process is not complicated. Like, you can just go to the international office and they will tell you how to get that done. But it comes down to, if you're focusing on a specific skill, please do. Don't go off of advice of people who are hearsay, who have not landed their own jobs yet. And because if you get a generic job, say if you're a generic mechanical engineer who can do anything but really don't specialize in anything, there might be another person who comes along and says, hey, I'm a general mechanical engineer, I don't need sponsorship. And so your competition becomes fierce, and you don't have that added skill you're bringing to the table. So again, pursue your interests.
Yimeng, share some job and internship search advice, including networking.
Yeah, I just talked to share my own experience. When I first came to UD, I work at, my first job is dining service at KU. It's around about 1 year. And one day, but I actively attend all the international, all like UD, ISSS, and career service. And we have a graduate student association. There are so many activities on campus. So I went to the activities and met several friends. And one day, one guy just, he will graduate. He graduated at the same year, and he asked me, do you want a job at an international admission office? I said, of course, it's better than KU. And then I went to see the manager at there, so I got a job. My second job on campus is international admission office. So then there's another networking like this activity, and I met actually it's a career service. I went to, sorry, I can't remember her name.
Shirley? Or Sylvie.
Sylvie is my advisor, and when I talk about my passion on accounting, and so she just goes through a list that go global something, have the company, you can see who hire, who can provide H-1B visa. There's a list online. So, and she also helped me to find some local company. And she just called one company, asked them, do you need an internship? And they said yes. So that's how I got my first off-campus intern, like a job as a tax professional. Then at church, I met another person. They have this local company called Verify, and they hire marketing intern because my undergrad major is business related. So I got the intern for marketing, but I have opportunity to do internal audit in that company because they know and they notice I have a skill on accounting. That's my second intern. After I graduate, so before I graduate, there for business, especially accounting major, there are some club. The one major club is called Beta Alpha Psi. They provide events every year, around like 12 events, almost once a month. So I attend all the events and to know more people, to get more information about job and to more about H-1B, everything. So I went to one event. I didn't expect to find a job there. I just want to know more people. But during that event, I'm the only one student there. All the other attendees are employer. And the host found I'm the only one student who will graduate after like 3-4 months. So he mentioned to all the employer, we have a graduate here, and if you have any opportunity, please contact her. So I didn't submit one of my resume to employer at all. So my experience is a little unique. So employer reached out to me almost for all my intern or jobs. So I got my first job after I graduated at a state audit. So I'm an auditor for 1 year. Then Fuyao, that's a new like a startup company in US. So they are hiring and they are looking for people who have bilingual skills and who have accounting skills. That's our president found out in Dayton. At that time, I'm the only one who know about it. So that's why I jumped to my current job. My point is networking is very important, and it's a more efficient way to have a job. But that's only my experience. I just encourage everyone to try different ways. Not only networking, not only submit your resume to the website, just try everything. We won't know because I didn't expect everything happen. Yeah.
She's completely right. You will hear me talk about networking, and so I worked with Yimong off and on, but I don't know that I've ever heard that whole networking story together.
Yeah.
And that's really how it happens. The other rumor you're going to hear is U.S. companies won't hire international students. I have students getting hired, even under this administration. It can be done. My message to everyone is you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself, because if you don't, I won't. And I'll know that when I network with you. And I'll tell you, Yimong, for however nervous she may have felt, she never showed it. She was always smiling, always confident. And if you don't feel it, you have to push yourself. Go to all the clubs, go to all the career service events, go to all the ISSS events. I always say, every employer who's on campus, you should be having a conversation with them. Even if you're nervous about your language skills, you're going to have to push through that, because if you can't speak and have a conversation, you won't get through an interview, right? That's beautiful. That's great. Okay, let's see. Jessica, what advantage, we did that one already. How can international students tailor their job search to those who might be willing to sponsor?
Yeah, I would say first you need to identify the target organization first, and they look at the history, and they hire international students or not. That's very important to do some, the background check, whether that organization is hiring the international students or not. That's very important. I think most of the organizations, they hire international students to some extent. So right now I work with the DoD, Department of Defense. So there was some restriction there, but because we work with the UD, so some students work here at the UD. So to get into the Air Force Base, for example, we need US citizenships, but still we keep some students in the UD. So therefore, still there's opportunity there. So that's a kind of extreme case. We're working with the defense right now. So most of the organizations, they hire international students. So you need to do some kind of history first, and so that's kind of my advice. And the academia is the right place. I don't know how many biology students here. So I work through, I'm a biologist, so there are limited, but there are a lot of biotech companies. They hire international students. There are kind of a lot of big biotech companies, and there are a lot of small biotech companies, biotechnology companies. So they hire international students. So that's kind of my advice, do the search on different organizations, their history, how many international students working. So I don't think there's a limitation. As I said, even Department of Defense, they hire international students through, as a, subcontractor. So they hire. So I think there's no limitation. The opportunities are there, definitely.
Joanne, could you share some interviewing tips?
Oh. I'm sorry, muted. Yeah, interviewing tips. Interviewing is important. So I'm going to talk about maybe some of the things that I see that people do really, really well and things that stand out to me. And it's going to sound a little different than probably what you're used to. And then I'll tell you some of the more common things that I think people tend to miss. One thing I think is really important when you interview is just be really authentic, be yourself, right? I think it's always interesting when you are able to connect with someone that you're interviewing with. So that's why you go to their LinkedIn profile, see if you have any common interests. It's really cool to look at an interviewer's background to see where they came from, what jobs they had, what school they went to. Those things are important for you to be able to provide some context into the conversation. A standard, do your research. the thing I think that's really important, and when I screen candidates and talk with them, is really, I know we talk about the STAR method a lot, situation, task, actions, results. That is standard. That's a wonderful way to answer a question. Master it, think about it. But, some of the things when I screen candidates that I want them to do really well is to really be able to explain their own personal contribution to projects, what they did. Often I'll talk to students and they'll talk about projects, and I'll have to drill down and say, well, what did you do? How did you drive it? What things did you solve, right? Because we want to see the unique things that you were able to do and were able to solve to get whatever project or job or whatever to success. I think it's also very important to really understand and have smart questions available. And it's good to have like the standard questions, but just really have a natural curiosity about what you're during the interview, right? I think it's always good to say, because sometimes I'll have people, they would have already had like these standard questions that were kind of out of context from the flow of the conversation. So it's, I tell people, I said, just when you're interviewing and something's interesting to you, bring it up, talk through it, ask questions, and have a really authentic conversation so it stops feeling like an interview and feels more like, colleague to colleague or a conversation. Those conversations tend to feel very real when I'm talking to students and when I'm interviewing. Always show up on time, but not too early. I think about 10 minutes early is good. 30 to 45 minutes early is awkward. So definitely show up in that sweet spot between 15 to 10 minutes. Follow-up email or card to say thank you. It's a lost art. People aren't doing it as much anymore. I definitely remember, personalized notes to people after you interview. That's always good. I think we definitely like people to not just understand what a company does, but if you actually dig into the website and understand what their mission is, like for LexisNexis, our mission is rule of law. Most companies have a mission, and when a student has dug that deep into the website and really did their research, what conferences the person has gone to, what things the company are doing. It goes beyond just, I know that you sell this and I know that you do this technology. That deeper dive just really shows a different level of preparation and insight into the interview. What else? People talk about dress, right? As a standard, do you wear the suit? Do you, wear the tie? I always say wear a suit and a tie. Most companies, you might interview with someone who has on jeans and a sweatshirt, and STEM, in my world, more than likely that's what you're going to see, people interviewing with you in jeans and a T-shirt, but still wear a suit, be professional, and know that you can wear jeans on your first day of work. Have your resume. Have your resume. Have several copies of your resume available, and also have one for you to review as well. All right. So most of the time they're going to go over your resume as you're speaking, and so it's good for you to have it in front of you too. And always have pencil and paper and something to take notes with as well. Those are some little things that I think make a difference.
Perfect. And your resume point brings us into Q's question on what are resume tips you would share based on your experience?
So some of the tips I'm going to share here are based on my experience, and then I talked to my boss and he was like, Q, you really did this wrong. So like some of those things I'm going to share. Some of these might be specific to like how we operate. So, we're one of those firms where we tell people coming in, do not wear a suit, do not wear formals for the interview, right? So if I'm too off or too generalizing, Joanne, please feel free to jump in and add on that front, or just let me know if I'm wrong. One thing I think leading into the resumes is being international. I used to think, the longer the resume, the better. I came from India, just an undergrad. I had like a 4-page resume, and I was like, man, my resume, anyone who reads it, I'm gonna get in. You know the problem with that? No one reads 4 pages. And what happened is, ironically now, like in our company, I manage, we're a small company, so we hire 1 intern every semester for our Columbus office, and then we have interns in Dayton also. But I'm in charge of intern hiring, and if I see a resume longer than a page, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot read this. Please give me the next resume. So for resumes, I would say be very concise. Tailor your resume to who you're applying for. So if you have a project that is very relevant to one company and not relevant to the other company, take what is not relevant out. Don't have a lot to read. I would say for undergraduate students and graduate students, your resume should not exceed 1 side. Like the most important information should be on that page. One thing my boss pointed out is, being international students, we take the GRE, right? So we remember all these fancy English words that we remembered for the GRE exam. And what happens is, all of us sort of put the same words in our resume. Like the first opening summary line, if you take 10 international student resumes, you'll find similarities in like 7. Because everyone's using the same word. Oh, I'm a very dexterous, vivacious, person looking to work in your company. And my boss is like, no, you have to keep in mind what is the norm. Like no one uses those words anymore. So it like makes your resume feel weird. And then there's like 10 other resumes that are in the same weird pile, so you don't stand out. Keep it simple. Don't use complex English words. Don't use words that you would not use in a conversation. And don't use words if you don't know the context to use the words. And just keep it very simple. Have a buddy review your resume. Have the career services office review it. Have like an American friend review it. You know, someone who's local who's like, no one speaks like that, man. So, you know, you can get that adjusted. And don't, again, those complicated words, don't copy unique sentences from your friend's resume, because it's likely you guys are applying for the same position at the same time. So it'll be like, these guys almost copied each other's resume. This is something my boss mentioned, and I don't know if this generalizes too much, and Joanne might be able to say if this is right or wrong, but in terms of personalizing your resume, have something like, I didn't know this, I didn't realize this, but there is a section in the resume that's common to have, is like hobbies or interests or like other activities where you can talk about. Again, this should be really concise, so this should not take more than 2 lines of your resume. But talk about clubs you have been to, because that's a culture reference to the person interviewing you. Because you have come from a different background that they don't understand. You could have something like favorite movies, or is there a sport you play, or I worked in such and such club. Things like that that give a cultural reference help you connect with the interviewer. And when we interview for like interns, we sort of start with that section just as an icebreaker. Oh, you're involved in such and such. And so just to get the conversation going. In terms of interview tips, I think UD has some resources in terms of getting your language and your speaking skills done right. And I don't want to say, you know, you're international. It's okay if you have an accent, but there's a lot of people, like if you go to southern US, you will see an accent. You'll be like, wait, are these guys speaking English like they do in Ohio? It's very different. So having an accent is not bad. You know, be confident, but you need to have proper sentence formation. What you're saying needs to make sense So take advantage of all those resources UD has to offer in terms of like improving your language and communication skills. And yeah, those are sort of the tips I had. Joanne, would you, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask Joanne about the hobbies thing, if that's common or.
Yeah, I always look at that. It's always interesting to see if someone was, you know, in a band, what clubs they're in, because I do think it adds a little bit of a personal flair. I would suggest not to include pictures. That's a new thing that's happening now. You're going to get some mixed advice about that, and it's weird because we're also internally working on diversity, and so you wanted to like gender diversity and such, and so there's like this contradiction between adding pictures or not and what that means in employment. So it just, that kind of depends. But yeah, I do think it's always good to have something that is interesting and unique. And his point is really good as well with regard to making your resume just look different. I mean, we hire a lot from NC State, and they all go to career services, and all the resumes look almost exactly the same. And since all of them have done so many of the same courses, and worked on the same projects, so you end up seeing like the same projects in the same way, almost like it's the same template. So it starts to feel repetitive. What helps stand out are the clubs. Did they participate in hackathons, sales competitions for sales events, or that's when you start to look at the other stuff, because we already know that the projects, the coursework, and everything are going to be pretty much the same across the board. So my eye immediately goes to the extra stuff that the student has to seek out. That's not a part of their standard academic courses.
That's great.
So one thing when you're writing the resume or the CV, one thing I notice is very important to address the selection criteria for that position. Let's say I have a position, you need to address those selection criteria. So how best you fit into that job. So that's the first thing I look at. So the other thing is that you need to validate your claim. So you say you have research experience so many years, so you need to validate that. That's very important. You come up with some kind of examples. Okay, so these publications I did. So that's kind of prove that you validate that. So those are the two things I notice. Other than the standard resume, I like you addressing the selection criteria. So you see that every job has a selection criteria. So you need to address that very well. That's the very important thing. So sometimes your GPA may be a little bit low, but that if you address that well, you have a chance there. So the one thing I noticed we hired a couple of students. So I kind of look at the selection criteria, how well they address that. So that's kind of very important. Thank you.
Good. I also want to mention the picture thing. If U.S. company, as John said, go for that way, no picture. But for Chinese company, I know a lot of Chinese company, they want to have a picture. So just before you apply, before you prepare your resume, ask somebody who like inside, who know what they prefer. So some company really prefer you have a picture there. So it depends.
That is very much a cultural thing. Yeah. And when you're going back home, there is guidance on going global for just about every country for interviewing and resume. And then you just need to know that if you have a resume or CV that is pertinent back home, you're probably going to have to change it to fit the U.S. standard if you're applying to a U.S. company. So that goes to your research, understanding the company and what they're looking for and tailoring that way. So that's very good.
Yeah, because they'll end up putting personal information like number of children, birth date, and such, which we are incredibly sensitive to here in the U.S. And so we end up seeing a lot of that on resumes that haven't been tailored for applying to positions in the U.S.
Yeah, I was about to say that those informations are kind of not relevant. One of the CVs I saw that person has put the father's name also. I don't know why we need that. I mean, that's true. I look at it, yeah. So I sometimes think those are not relevant. So.
I've seen religion on there. You don't need that on there either. So those are all very good. Well, before I open it up for questions, is there anything from the panelists that I haven't covered that you're like, oh, I want to say this?
I had a point in terms of networking and a few related points, but one thing, because networking goes towards, you're trying to meet people, and then you want to meet people who you can demonstrate your skill to. So most of you might have heard the phrase, desperation is a smelly cologne. So it just smells bad. So like there's a lot of people I knew, like when they would go to networking event, they were like, I need to get like 100 cards. Like I want to meet 50 people. And some events are like that, but it's even better if instead of meeting 50 people, you meet 3, and you're able to establish a connection with them. Then you could go connect with them on LinkedIn. You get connected to their network, things like that. It's a better experience if you spend time talking to that one person, understanding what they do. And just kind of my career arc, the interviews, everyone's always nervous in an interview, right? Especially first timers. So what happened with me was like, I didn't even know I was being interviewed I actually interviewed for like 4 positions, but the 2 positions, the positions I actually got offers for, I was first informally interviewed and I didn't know. And I was like completely carefree. So like one example was I published a paper and I presented at the conference, but then this guy came up and talked to me. He was like an older guy. So I was like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this research. And I would be like, oh, what does your company do? Oh, how do you handle this situation when you do this? I did not know he was like an owner of a company looking for talent. So he goes back and then he's like, hey, how you doing? Can we fly you out? And I was like, oh my God, I got an interview. So then it was different. It becomes different. But having that one-on-one, and even in an interview, when you ask questions, they shouldn't be like, oh, these are the 10 must-ask questions I printed off from the internet. Those might be like completely irrelevant and out of context to the job you're interviewing for. Like, for example, if you were working on a project and the company does something along that project, and if they're hiring you because of that skill set, because you have that skill, you know what situations they can run into. So you could ask a curious question that the information you get is still useful to you with or without that job. It's questions like this that technical people interviewing look for. It isn't like, well, when you graduated from college, what was the skill you would like to have? And I was like, how is this relevant to the interview we're having? It's like completely, it puts the flow of the interview off. So I guess just be genuine when you're doing networking and both at interviews, is just be genuine. If you are curious about something, you can have a question. And if you're skilled and if you're talking about projects, you will have questions, but don't force the question, I guess is what I'm guessing at. Oh no, the online tip said you should always ask a question, and then people just start asking questions. In terms of a thank you note, that's a good thing. Don't go overboard on it. We recently had like an intern candidate. He sent me like a whole 1-page thank you note, and I was like, we don't have time to read this 1-page thank you note. You just need to be casual. The reason the thank you note is there is to show you're interested in that and you're being in touch. That's about it. It's not like you're not redoing the interview. You need not recap the interview on the thank you note.
I want to share something with you about publications. So we publish a lot, biologists. Sometimes it's also look at your citations. Who is citing your work? Let's say you publish a paper today, so who is citing your work? So that helps you to develop the networking. Actually, there are job offers I got because of citations. So that's kind of keep an eye on your papers. You publish to sometimes look at it, so you see who is citing your work. So some people read and cite, so that helps us to develop the networking. And when you go to next meeting or conference, you can talk to them. So that way you can develop a very good relationship. So that really helped me.
One more thing I wanted to highlight. This is in terms of skill and what was already said on the panel here, and more on interest. So academia, it got underscored in our conversation, but I just want to point out, being in academia, being in research, it has its own benefits, even though it might not pay more, it is a safer option. So for example, the H-1B lottery was talked about here, things like that. So who knows even what an H-1B lottery is, just by show of hands? All right, very few people. So basically, a limited numbers of H-1B visas are granted every year. There's a limit, it's like 65,000. And there's a lot of people applying for that. But research institutions, nonprofit research institutions, for example, like UDRI, like national labs, universities, all these people, they're exempt from that cap, right? So you get paid less, it's research, but there's a sort of there's security there. You know, you've reduced one risk factor. And if your research like eliminates a few risk factors. Now, I'm not saying everyone go and apply for like national labs per se, but if you have that knack, you know, because you might have seniors say, well, you get into research, what are you going to make? You know, private sector pays so much, but you have to weigh those options, especially if you're interested and want to go the research route. You should not, again, just not let your dreams go just because someone said, oh, I might not make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. So.
Okay, so are there questions that you have now that you've heard all this great advice?
Yeah. So there are a lot of companies that are trying to hire.
Speak up, please, because it's on the phone.
So there are a lot of these vendors that are trying to hire international students right now. So is it like, what would you say, like approaching vendors is like a safer option, or?
So does anyone have?
Is anyone good with that? It has to do with vendors.
Yeah.
Joanne, do you have any?
When you say vendors, are you talking what type of vendors?
So
IT.
Yeah, IT vendors.
IT. They're like Claudiva, some of those larger companies who are putting
like
in a lot.
consultancy or like those vendors?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we use I think Emphasis and a few to staff a lot of our positions, like project based. I think it really depends. I mean, the advantage per se would be that, you know, there's not a risk of you know, gaps of employment, you know, because you can't be without sponsorship and without work for a certain period of time, you know, because you'll be out of compliance. But then I have people that I work with who have crisscrossed the country trying to, you know, make sure that they remain employed, and that can be difficult for people. And then you have to really look at the contracts that are signed, because they can restrict you from, you know, working with certain clients and such. And so you want to see what type of engagement you would be getting into when you sign a contract with one of these agencies. And so my thoughts are it really just depends on what you sign and what you committed to and how long that commitment is, and just make sure that you still have the ability to leave that contract. When we have worked with people who we wanted to hire from, certain agencies, it's been tougher for us. So when you think about, having to buy out a contract or something, because you have a contract with that agency, we are trying to engage with you. So you would then have to deal with whatever contractual obligations you have from that agency. So I think it's just really important to, know the contract you're signing, and know what you're beholden to, and make sure that you're comfortable with it.
So is this actually legal to be hired by a contracting agency as an applicant in their OPT?
Yes, it's legal to be hired in your OPT by a contracting agency, but what you want to make sure is that it's tied to what you studied.
Okay.
It has to be tied to your degree. So you can't, if you're a mechanical engineer and you're being hired to do database something, then that's a long stretch, and that's where I see a lot of trouble. I also want to take this moment to make everyone aware of fraudulent employers. So these are people who pose as employers. Please do not post your resume online to where people can see your phone number. Okay, that's what LinkedIn is for. Your personal information is not in there. Same with Handshake. Your personal, they're not going to call you on the phone. But if you post your resume online and then you get a phone call from an employer who says, oh, I have the perfect job for you, and they give you a job description that they have tailored to your skill sets, and then they say something like, oh, and for $500 for training, you'll get your money back, but we just need $500 up front, and you go and cut the check, and then you're wondering why they're not answering your call anymore. Those are fraudulent employers. Be aware of that. Don't fall. You should never have to pay for a job.
So
yeah,
I wanted
you want
to
also be. Oh, go ahead.
I'll let Joanne finish.
No, I was just saying, to Lisa's point, you also want to be careful. The compliance issues that we've had recently have been with people who we've subcontracted who worked for some of these larger agencies, because we were talking earlier about making sure all the filings are done and everything is done above board. There's certain requirements that we have to do when we hire someone, an international student or employee, notifications that we have to give, specific documentation, offer letter, job description for the role that they're applying for. And if companies aren't doing this diligently, then, the company can get in trouble, but the employee is the one that has to carry the brunt of those risks. And so some of the questions you'll want to make sure to ask is, have they had any compliance issues? What law firm handles all of their immigration filing? We use Dwayne Morris. So you don't be afraid to really, really ask those deep dive questions, because it really is going to be your lifestyle that's going to be impacted if they are not doing the right thing.
I was just going to add to that point, how many people in the room get what type of contractors we're talking about here? Show of hands. All right, just like 5 people. So these are companies which will basically, this happens a lot more in the tech sector, where company A will say, hey, I want to hire you. And then they hire you, you sign a contract, and company A puts you don't even have an office in company A. You just go, you sit and work in company B. And if company A is paying you 80, they're collecting 100 from company B. And so their whole asset for that company, their whole business model is making money off of people. So that in itself sounds wrong, right? Or is anyone like, that's a great business model? Anyone?
How do I start that business?
Yeah. So that in itself, where it gets into, again, Joanne mentioned compliance issues. There's a lot of, that is how I've heard some good stories about that. So for example, a good story is you get hired by that company and it's like a stepping stone, right? You go work for company B, and then as soon as your contract is done with company A, company B says, we want you on our team. We don't want you to hire you through all these people. That is, from a student standpoint, I know it's a little less work to go to company A, but finding out who company B is, networking and applying is always worth it. The reason you hear all this bad, how should I say it? I'm trying to think of politically correct Trump. Bad press around the H-1B visa is because there's a lot of companies like this that misuse the restrictions the H-1B visa poses. So for example, you cannot travel easily out of the country, your visa has to be up of date. One of the biggest things is you cannot move employers. You cannot switch employers, and there's a compliance issue which all of you should be familiar with what status means, right? That's like ISSS 101 class, like before you even start any course here. You have to be in status to be, they don't use the term legal, they use the word status. So if you're on an H-1B, if you're switching a job, the next employer has to do a H-1B, and there needs to be a smooth transition. If a H-1B is terminated and you don't have a job in between, you're out of compliance. Now, if the company you're leaving is good and the company you're going to is good, no problem. But vendors like this misuse that leverage they have, because they will make it clear that if they find out any such thing about that, they're going to lose their money. They're making X% off of you. They're not shy on terminating your. Now, again, I'm talking about people that misuse, but what I'm trying to highlight is the importance of why you need to find places where they're placing you. Because keep in mind, they don't have that work, right? They're giving you to someone else. That means someone else has that need for skill. If company A exists, it's because companies B through Z have a need for skill. Now, there are some legit consulting companies. For example, we are a energy efficiency consulting firm, but we operate slightly differently. So there are consulting firms like that who specialize in something. You still work for the firm and you go work at a site. So for example, if you're an architect building a building, right, and you have to build a building in downtown Dayton, you might need to be on site till that building is built, but you're still working for this architectural firm. That is still consulting. That is a very different form of consulting compared to these like vendors who basically take you and put you someplace else. It's an easier choice. This is one of the points I had, is one thing international students miss out on is they're not patient, they're very anxious, and you don't start early. You need to start, if you're a master's student, 1 year into your master's, you need to start applying to places. Because what happens is big organizations, it might take them 6 months before they even see your resume and give you a call for like a phone interview. By the time the technical interview happens, it'll be time for your graduation and OPT. So if you're done with your first year of master's, you need to get that resume down, you need to start applying everywhere, and you need to be patient. Because what happens if you wait till this last moment, you're anxious, things take time, and companies, the vendor companies are your only option. And it's only because you don't understand the system. You don't realize that, hey, it takes time to apply for a job, get a call back. You know, internship applications are done 3 months in advance. And I knew friends who I was like, hey, did you make your resume yet? And he was like, no, I'll do it when I apply for my OPT. And I was like, no, that is not the time. Because, you know, internships, there's a 3-month process. You know, career services might have, you know, if you're looking for spring internships with start in Jan, you were called for an interview in like September. So a full-time job is going to be a much bigger time lag. So be aware of that. Be patient. Apply in advance.
And I want to add one thing. Maybe find a lawyer, your personal lawyer, to review your contract, because any contract may have some limitation for your future career. So, and also I would suggest the UD can have the service, law service, legal service to students. Because for resume or contract, especially employee contract, it's better we have the service available to students. I know Wright State have the service.
And it could be law student interns.
Yeah, law student interns will very often do.
Right.
But they are students. Right. We also coordinate with immigration lawyers in the city. You know, there's immigration lawyers down in Cincinnati as well, so you'll use them. Excuse me.
So any questions?
Do you guys then like more details about the resume, like the difference between resume and CV? Since I recently got some apply some jobs of the like international companies, and they asked me for CV. But for those local companies, they mostly just ask me for the resume and cover letter. So I just want to know the difference.
I can do that, or you guys can do that. Go away. So a resume very typically is for a job in industry. The people who typically require a CV, which is longer, resume 1 page, CV can be multiple pages, are typically academia, anything in medical field, psychology field, research institutions. They want more information. Your typical resume will be, what is your objective or your summary? What's your education? What's your hard skills, your experience, and then some of those activities. A CV will have all that, plus conferences you've gone to and attended, presented at, publications that you've done, organizations, teaching that you've done. There's going to be a much more extensive list. Always at Career Services website, we have guides and samples under the student section, so you can go and look at some templates for that to help you understand what you should be including.
And to add to that, UD does this, is every professor teaching, their CV will be on their website. So you can get an idea, oh, I know this professor, his intro page you see will be like, he's interested in this, he's done this, he's chair of this department. You know, very short, resume style. Then you open a CV, it'll be like, this publication this year, this publication. So it will be longer, and you should look at those samples.
Joanne, when I talk to students about cover letters, and I'd like your input on this one, I talk about the resume kind of being the black and white of your experience and skills, whereas the cover letter is your heart and intent of why you want to work for that company, and kind of the so what of your experience and what you can do for that company. Is there anything you would change or add to that?
You know, it's so funny because I say typically, you know, we may not often read the cover letters. However, when I do, it always tells me something important. So I will say, if you're going to include a cover letter, make sure that it's relevant. When I've gone and I looked at someone's resume and I said, there's a question I need to answer, let me go to the cover letter and see what it says. say, I'm looking for a role to do XYZ, which is not the role they applied for, right? So as much as you want to tailor your resumes, please also make sure you tailor your cover letter to fit the role that you're applying for, because that often can be disqualifying for me if I'm looking for a developer and the cover letter says that they want to be something else because they didn't take the time to change. Not only does it not align with the role, it also speaks to like attention to detail, which is important. I've often done a cover letter if I look at someone and I say, well, you know, they want to, what do they want to move to North Carolina? In the cover letter, they'll add some tidbit, some personal tidbit that is valuable. So what I would say is, you know, if you're going to, a cover letter never hurts unless you're not careful and diligent. And if you're going to include one, make sure that it has something that can enhance your experience or say something about you that you wouldn't get from the resume because, as Lisa said, the resume is just a black and white document of your experience. So if you're going to include it, definitely always make sure that it says if the role you're targeting matches the role you're applying for, or that it's general enough that you can use it across different roles, but if it's very specific, make sure that it also aligns with the role that you have applied for. That is the biggest thing, and I say, well, it's just really odd how often that happens. So I would just say that's a piece of advice I would say about the cover letter. Just make sure it's relevant. Make sure that it is tailored for the role, and the interesting bit of information that you want someone to know about you, definitely include that, because that's the value that I get when I do read the cover letters. And that's often the reason I actually go to the cover letters, because there's a question I want answered, and often the cover letter will give me that answer.
And it must be error-free. It is a writing sample of your work. If there's any error, you're already out. So it must be error-free.
And also, if you're applying for teaching jobs, sometimes if you're going to be a teacher, you know, lecturer or professor, then you need to write a teaching philosophy. So that's very important. And also, if you're applying for a research job, you need to show your research interest. What you're going to be in next 5 years, pretty much. What is your research? That will be really getting some kind of attraction when you read that CV. What you're going to be next 5 years. This is my plan already there. So, I mean, if you want to be a professor in that kind of academia, so we're looking at those things too. Your teaching style in the teaching philosophy. So how you're going to connect with the students, your teaching style and all that. You need to mention like a 1 page or half a page.
When we apply online through LinkedIn, Joanne mentioned that employers look at the hobbies and everything. So when we upload a profile, is it okay if our hobbies are really good and we don't have a profile picture, or are there any employers specifically look at the profile picture and think something?
Yeah, good question. Do you want to answer this, Joanne, or you want me to?
The profile picture? You know, so it's interesting because so technically, you know, in the U.S. we're really sensitive about anything that could, with regard to bias, that can sway an employer, and so, but a profile picture on LinkedIn is important, I think. You know, our interns, our interns in Raleigh and Dayton, we have a professional photographer give them headshots for their LinkedIn profiles, and it's always a hit for them. And we tell them it doesn't have to be, you know, you in a suit. It could be you in a T-shirt, whatever stands out about you, however you want to do. But it is a professional picture. You are going to get more responses with a picture, and the reason you should have it there is because it's part of the profile. Like on a resume, it's different. A resume doesn't have a spot for a picture, right? So there, you add it because you want to, but to have a robust LinkedIn profile, to have just the empty part, just like having the egg on Twitter, it just feels incomplete. So you want to make sure to have the picture so that your profile can be complete.
I agree with Joanne. What we say is we don't trust who we can't see. What are you hiding? So the picture is important. If it's a legality issue, most employers won't go to the LinkedIn. But for everyone else who's on the team, they can go check that person out because they're not going to be held responsible for any legalities. It's your professional presence to the world about who you are. And so you do want a picture, you want to be smiling, you want it to be head and shoulder, you don't want to have sunshades on. I don't care how cool you think you look in sunshades. You want to not have someone's hand resting in the picture that you've cut someone out. So be professional. Okay. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, I have been correct here twice, and every time I have been there, the employers always ask me like, do you need a visa or do you want, sponsored? So every time I got the question, I'm so embarrassed because, to be honest, I need it. But the first time I answered, I need it, and they told me, no, we don't have the position. So it's really upset, right? So what should we do if we are in the same situation? So
yeah, I have an answer to that, but I would love to hear the panelists answer first.
I was just gonna say you should give a more nuanced answer. I would say, like you should give an answer that is more than because when my boss asked me in my interview, because we're a small company, I said yes, but there is a process for that. For the next 1 year, I don't need anything, right? Because you have OPT, so you don't need anything. And then I can extend the OPT if the company just enrolls in that program. I didn't even go that far. I just said I could work 1 year. I need OPT. I need to know if you're still interested, if you will sponsor, and there's a process, and you should do some research on that process, right? Just not be like, yes, I need it, and then if it's like a small or medium business, they might be like, well, I don't know what that means. I don't have because like people think it's a big deal. Like I don't have a attorney on staff. I don't know what that means. I don't know what needs to be done. So you should, when you respond to that question, you should be like, you know what needs to be done. And you should think about, are you skilled enough? And is that company using your skill, right? If they're using your skill, they will sponsor. Like, even if they haven't done it, they will do it. But again, you should be like, are they using your skill? Because if they're not using a skill, they're making you do what everyone else is going to do. Like if it's a generic job, then they might not want to do that step. But if you're a very specialized and if the company wants you because you're specialized, they won't be able to find anyone else very easily, right? So you should be confident with that and just like lead with a nuanced answer. But at the end of, say, your technical round or the rounds after that, you do want to try and do first research on that company to see if they have OPT students. Because like I said, E-Verify list is public. You just put in the zip code of that company, you will know if they're E-Verified. And if they are, chances are they know about H-1B. So when you're ending the interview, you want to know if they're willing. Just know they're willing. You don't say, can you do this? You just be like, so if things work out, would you be willing? You know, something like that. Because you don't want to scare them. But if you're a specialized person, you might have another job interview where they're also interested, but they might pay you less or something. You know, you might have multiple jobs to compare. So you want to get that confirmation.
Yeah, I think Q covered all my points. First, research. Second, be confident. Third, that's a two-way selection. Not only company select you, you select company. If they are not willing to do that, you won't have a happy working environment after you got hired. And plus, your English is very good. So I think you will find more opportunity. Just forget about that company. Yeah.
Thank you.
Move on. Yeah.
And I would add one more point to that. Body language, right? You ask someone, you know, would you sponsor? And they say no, and you roll your eyes, and you just walk away from the table. You were never interested in them. You were interested in the H1. But for him to tell me no, oh, that's too bad, because I'm really interested in the research you're doing. Here's what I've been doing in my research, and now they know you're interested. And now, you know, I may have a policy, but I will bend it if I love you. You want them to love you, okay? And she's right. If they don't and they're not even willing, then you don't want to work for them anyway. Okay. Okay. And then the other point, I'll get to you, is, oh, you don't sponsor. Does anyone you know sponsor? Because they all go to career fairs. They're all talking to each other. They're all friends. They've been at other companies. Oh, you know what? Yeah, the company who supports us, maybe. Let me give you a name and number. So stay at the table. Stay in a conversation with people. Don't just walk away angry. Okay.
I'll add that, you know, companies that come to career fairs are usually larger companies. Like, for example, we hire out of UD. A lot of our employees are UD, like more than 50%, but we're not big enough to be at the career fair. So keep in mind that there's small and medium businesses, even large businesses maybe, that don't show up at the career fair. And you still want to be applying, work with the career services, work with your professor to know which companies are in your field that are not close, and you know, they might not have an Ohio presence, so they might not show up, but you know, you being international, the entire country is fair game for you, right? So that is a very strong strength that most people don't have. Like, people might not want to move to different places. So use that. But
I want you all going to the career fair. I don't want a negative experience for you to say, I've been to 2, it's crap, I'm not going again. You want to keep going because you're talking, you're learning, you're listening to other people, and you're getting more confident about who you are and how you're able to express yourself. So you need to go for no other reason than to do that. And to hopefully network.
Right, and for 1 year, UD has a career fair, and as I do the research, there's no one company sponsor for H1B and for my major. So, but I select to go, but without carrying my resume. I just talk to the company who hire accountant, and to know the company, to know what's this position they want, what skill. So I can be prepared. So I don't want to find a job there, but I want to just learn more. Yeah.
Think of it as like free practice. You know, not much is free in the U.S. or anywhere else in the world for that matter. Right. But it is free practice. You know, you get to talk to people who spend their time to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Your question.
Well, due to my scholarship, I didn't get the opportunity to gain work experience. And I know for a fact that work experience is a significant advantage for applicants. So I guess my question is, what are the chances for students or people at home getting a job or interview?
Okay, so Joanne, the question is, because of the scholarship situation, he was not able to get a practical experience. What are the chances for getting a job? I have some thoughts, but if you have some as well.
You know what? Sorry, I've had a little bit of cough. I went to a career fair recently, and I had a lot of students come up to me, and they led with, I only have this, I haven't done this, basically asking the question that you have in that exact same way. And I looked at them and I said, we're not hiring experts, we're hiring for potential. So when you come to, when you go to the next table, you go and talk about what you have to offer, not what you don't have. Because our expectation for hiring new and career talent is to train. Our expectation is not to have someone who already has practical experience. And even if you've already done an internship or someone's done one internship, it doesn't make them an expert. An internship is only 3 months. So, you know, you're still just looking at potential. And we've had people who've done internships and they weren't that great, you know. So what you have to do is you have to lead with what you have, what you know. Do you have what experience do you bring? What competencies do you bring that will make you valuable? And the education that you have, the background that you have, the clubs you've been in, the research that you've done, all of those things are valuable. So you devalue what you have to offer when you lead with, I only have this and I don't have that. So never, ever lead with that. You always need to lead with confidence with what you can offer a company, and that's what they're going to look for. If you go in defeated, and I had a lot of students come to me in the career fair to the point that I was like, I would tell each one, don't do that. What do you think we're hiring? We're not hiring experts. We're hiring for potential. So come to me and tell me what you have to offer. And they all left all jazzed up. But, I mean, seriously, you want to go in and to a company when you interview, this is what I'm good at. This is how I can help you. This is what I want to accomplish. This is why I believe in your mission and what you're doing. And this is how, and this is what you're going to get. This is the value you're going to get out of hiring me. And they're going to make their decision based on that. But if you lead with, but I haven't done an internship, then they're automatically going to say, well, they haven't done an internship, when actually it probably didn't even matter in the first place.
Does that help?
Yeah.
And also, if once you have a job, don't be afraid to ask a question, because you don't think about I know everything, I should know everything, and you're afraid to ask. So once you got a job, just be confident and don't be afraid. Yeah.
It's definitely about confidence and skill. Lead with your confidence and your skill.
Well, we have actually exceeded our time, and so I would like for all of us to thank our panel members. All right. And thank you so much for coming. Please do not leave without taking food. I want all of those baskets empty. Make sure you've signed in. I will share resources with you. I will stay for another half hour to go over some of the resources they have talked about today. So if you're interested, please stay, and I will go through those resources. Joanne, thank you so much.
Thank you for being creative so that I could participate. I definitely have enjoyed it.
This is great. I learned so much from all of you. I learned something new today from everybody. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.